Hi, welcome. It's Lori Morse, and I wanted to have a kind of a broad brush stroke conversation about the masculine and the feminine and stress because it's a thing. So, in my background in Chinese medicine, which I've been involved in for 30 years, we learn that yin is the feminine and yang is the masculine. And yang is everything that animates and it gives us life and it's light. And when we wake up in the morning, we have the most yang, and it's what animates us and gives us energy all throughout the day. It also helps with function in the body, all the organ systems and all the functions of the organ systems. And it's not necessarily an energy we see per se. The sun is also yang. It's warm, it's active, it's energetic. It's often, I like to use the analogy that it's like the wind. It makes, there's movement and there's activity, and wind makes the tree branches sway, but we don't necessarily see the wind, but we can't say it doesn't exist, kind of like that. Again, broad brushstroke ideas here. And then the yin is more along the lines of the feminine and the moon. And, we're on a planet of polarity. So everything is in sort of counterbalancing contrasts, which make up a whole, right? And so the yin in the body, anyway, is about fluid, so our oceans, fluid, and our lymph system and our blood. It's things with tangible substance, right? And so that's just sort of the general idea of yin and yang and the masculine and the feminine. Now, in terms of the collective consciousness in humanity, it is generally understood that we have been under more of a masculine dominance. There's been more masculine dominance over God knows how many thousands of years. And one of the things that one of the so let me, before I say the next thing, I want to say that there are high functions to both the feminine and the masculine, and there are shadow functions, or non-serving functions. So serving functions and non-serving functions. And so some of the things I just said about yin and yang and masculine and feminine are serving functions, right? So one of the non-serving functions for the masculine is an abuse of power. And one of the non-serving functions of the feminine is an abdication of power. Now, what's interesting is that when we correlate these energies to our nervous system, then the masculine's energy of abuse of power ends up being kind of a fighting energy. So in our nervous system, we have when we have a stress response, we have it's very well known that there's a fight, flight, or freeze mode that tends to kick in when we have a stress response, right? So this is the, again, broad brushstrokes, give me some leeway here. In the masculine and yang, it's a fight mode, right? And we see this. If we've been in masculine dominance for a number of years, then things like war make sense. Fight is the place that masculine energy, which we all have, falls into kind of like a warring, fighting mode, right? And I'm not saying you are a war person. I'm just saying that, just in that broad way, the scales are tipped in favor of that kind of masculine energy. Okay. So in the feminine energy, in the realm of abdication, well, I want to tell you one more thing, but let me finish this thought. In the realm of abdication, women can tend to freeze, and we can tend to get really good at tolerating conditions, right? Now, where I find the interesting thing about the two energies and our nervous system and the stress response is that if there's more fight and or no, I shouldn't say it that way. If there's fight and freeze or flight, which we all do all the time, then we're in this constant tug of war and push pull, and there isn't necessarily a what's the words I want to use? There isn't necessarily a a harmony, that's the word. There isn't harmony between our masculine and our feminine. And that is extremely stressful in a human body, right? There isn't harmony between the masculine and the feminine, and certainly there isn't that higher serving energy as dominant between the masculine and the feminine in our collective yet. Now, you may or may not know that the feminine or the yin energy is rising up in our very lifetime for the very purpose of harmony between the masculine and the feminine. Like the dominance of the masculine is no longer the order of the day. So what has to happen for all of us is we need to raise our feminine energy in each of us, man or woman. I work with women, and I'm a woman, obviously, so I know what it feels like. I know, I can speak more to the idea of what it means to, raise our or our feminine energy as a woman. So a few of the things that looks like is that instead of, well, let me go back to some of the things, some of the qualities when the masculine energy is dominant in a body and a life, are that things are hard. There's rigidness, there's stiffness, there's resistance. This is the non-serving masculine energy that's in all of us. We were born into a masculine dominant balance, right? So we have had to find our way. And if you happen to be a woman who's been in the workforce for any length of time, you have to kind of operate from that push masculine, almost like pushing a boulder up a hill kind of way, because that's just the order of the day, right? So non-serving masculine energy is inflexible and unpliable. So when we think about tension in our body, that falls under that category, right? There's a compression, it's forceful, it's arduous. I mean, think of, sometimes I don't know why I have this visual, but I think when I think of arduous, I think of hard work, and I think of like Stone Age men rolling boulders and pushing things uphill and, hard work, right? Strenuous, fatiguing, tiring, backbreaking, punishing, difficult, puzzling, baffling, tangled. Like that's all tends to be lower form masculine energy. And we can look at things like the lower energies of abdication, which is like not using our voice, people pleasing, putting all other needs before our own, the willingness to let all of our energy be sucked out of us for like everything around us, in service of everything around us. Being held back, being pressed down, being silenced, those would be, and not speaking up, right? And then this idea of tolerating, and I'm going to come back to that. There's a reason I've mentioned that a couple of times. So high level masculine energy is growth and expansion and light and protection and provision and empowerment and support, right? So high level feminine energy is gentle. It could be fierce too, but there's always a compassion and an understanding if fierceness needs to come into play. The feminine energy always knows what the right thing is in any given moment, right? Because there's a connection to life, and life is generally considered to be, like earth considered to be is her, and life is considered to be her, right? Generally speaking. Again, give me some latitude, broad brushstrokes here, just for the sake of making the point. So other higher expressions of the feminine energy are plentiful, like a plentiness, plenty of time, plenty of energy, plenty of resources, plenty of creativity, plenty of wisdom, that kind of thing. It's a softness, not a weakness though. Softness does not imply weakness. Only a lower masculine energy would mock softness as weakness. So these are important distinctions to get used to and to become aware of, right? There's an ease and a flexibility in a higher feminine energy and a pliability. I remember one time I was stretching a number of years back, and I've been stretching every day for like 35 years, right? So I should have a certain level of flexibility. In my mind, I was thinking this, and pliability. Like, I don't know why that word came to me, but I use that mind. How can I be pliable in muscles? And this was part of the unfolding of this entire masculine feminine understanding, and I'm still in the midst of the understanding. I might be till my last breath, but I like to share what I've discovered so far. So anyway, a simplicity to a higher feminine energy, and a kindness and a lightness and a compassion, and there's a comfort and a luxuriousness and beauty and a flow and an agency. So those are really interesting considerations. So what happens now, this is like the pièce de résistance. We each have counterbalancing masculine and feminine energies in our body. The way it's talked about in terms of yin and yang and perfect balance is that there's equal amounts of, well, not at, well, let me just start out by saying there's equal amounts of yin and yang, but they're not always equal at the same time. So you might be able to pull up in your imagery, in your mind's eye, that circle that has the black and white, like half of it's black, half of it's white, but then there's the opposite circle. So in the black section, there's a white circle. In the white section, there's a black circle. What that represents is that when yang is at its peak, which happens to be at noon every day, there's still a little bit of yin. And when yin happens to be at its peak, which happens to be midnight every day, there's still a little bit of yang. Imbalance comes when that isn't at, in a cyclical and rhythmic harmony based on nature's cycles, right? Which we live out nature's cycles every 24 hours, every breath really, but it's marked by a 24-hour chunk of time. So we're in a masculine dominant culture, and so and we haven't yet awakened or awaken ourselves, enlightened ourselves to I'm not finding the right texts of my words here, or tenses. So we haven't awoken yet to these higher energies fully. So the masculine dominant energies are still mostly operating at that non-serving level. So what that means to us as an individual is that we each have masculine and feminine energies in us. I know I've said that repetitively. So we have this tendency to be abusive at the masculine, lower masculine level. We're hard on ourselves. We're critical of ourselves. We're highly judgmental. We push ourselves. We over control ourselves, right? Which makes it very difficult for our feminine energy to have any spaciousness, to be all its self, right? All of herself in us. So and that is extremely stressful, day in and day out, to be that hard on ourselves and then to abdicate, right? Now, I'm talking about what we started out by talking the macrocosm of the general qualities. Now this is happening at the microcosmic level. Each one of us as a human being are a microcosm of the macrocosm, right? So these are the ways this plays out. And so there's ancient wisdom and there's modern understanding that is based in science and research on how to bring those into right balance, how to bring the two branches of our nervous system, which is masculine sympathetic and feminine parasympathetic, if we want to break it out into that yin yang sections, right? There are ways to actually bring those into balance where we lift our feminine energetics and we bring our masculine energies into right order, and then there is harmony in a body. And only when that is more the order of the day than not, no matter what's happening on the external, no matter the happenings of the world or the things we have to tend to in our day, because there's always something, right? No matter what, there is more harmony than not. So we are not being corroded and basically torn down by a stress response which most people live in as a matter of habit now. And it's so easy to get, kind of pulled back into that groove. It's almost like an autopilot, right? It's a habituated situation at this point, but it doesn't mean that we have to live that way. We do need the tools. We do need to get ourselves out. And I love meditation and therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy and supplements and, the Calm app and the breathing tech. I love all of that stuff. That helps us just sort of like calm the situation, right? Like that's acute medicine, but it doesn't always get to the chronic nature of our stress response. That's where the yin yang, masculine feminine harmonization needs to come in. And that is really important. And I invite you to consider that that is your next step, right? Like, and when I check in with my higher wisdom about this, what I hear, and I've heard this for a number of years now, is that while there's no rush, you don't need to, turn on a fire alarm about this, but there is no time to waste. There's very little time to waste if we're to bring ourselves, our communities, our species, our planet back into harmony, right? So this is part one of this conversation, because I actually have a lot more, like there's a next level when we talk about Earth and, and taking care of her, right? And then what that means, how that is interchanged with us again as a microcosm of her, and bringing those things to the level of the sacred, because honestly that is what harmony between the masculine and the feminine ultimately ends up being, is the cultivation of the balance between the two as sacred, right? So if you have any comments, please drop them in the comment box below. And what else did I want to tell you about this? I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. I think that's pretty good. Well, we can catch whatever I missed on my notes in part two of this conversation of yin yang, masculine feminine balance, and what that means to us in terms of stress, the stress response, and our nervous system. Thanks for being with me. Lori Moore signing off.